later this week, we will, of course, bring you all of those updates. Moving on now, and for the first time since early 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin signalled openness to direct talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, particularly on stopping strikes on civilian infrastructure. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed Putin's remarks referred to bilateral negotiations. Meanwhile, Zelensky responded by reaffirming Ukraine's proposal for a 30-day halt on missile and drone attacks targeting civilians. The Ukrainian president also demanded a clear answer from Moscow, all while Putin acknowledged a recent strike on a civilian building in Sumy, calling it a mistake. As both sides cautiously explore the idea of limited ceasefires, Ukraine will meet with US and EU leaders in London this week to push for a broader truce. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Yulia Kazdabina, a senior fellow of Ukrainian Prism, who's joining us from Kyiv. Yulia, thank you very much for being here with us. I first would like to talk about the statement that we've seen from Vladimir Putin, talking about direct talks and looking potentially at stopping civilian strikes. What's your opinion to this statement?
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I think it's the opinion is pretty clear. The fact that this is an unprovoked Russian aggression against Ukraine, it didn't change. And so what is there to talk about? Russia stopped shooting at civilian infrastructure, and Ukraine never targeted Russian civilian infrastructure. There were cases when Ukrainian drones were shot down by Russian air defenses over Russian civilian areas, and there were cases when Russian civilians died in this war, but Ukraine never deliberately targeted Russian civilian infrastructure, unlike Russia. And that case in Sumy that you mentioned, it was actually what they call a double tap attack, when first they hit a busy downtown area on a Sunday when people with families were there. And then when rescuers and also passers-by rushed to the scene to help those who suffered in the first strike, they actually sent the second missile, and the second missile had the kind of warhead on it that blew up in the air to make sure that it killed as many or hurt as many people as possible. So, I mean, and Ukraine has never done anything like that. And so when Putin talks about him and Zelensky talking about stopping attacks on civilian infrastructure, he kind of implies that Ukraine does the same, but Ukraine doesn't. It's Russia who continues killing Ukrainian civilians.
Yulia, I want to bring up a comment that was made by French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, who called Putin's 30-hour Easter truce a marketing operation. Is there a fear within Ukraine that these comments of bilateral ties may be, as this has been proposed by the French Foreign Minister, a marketing ploy, as he's called it, to potentially bring Donald Trump back into the negotiating sphere after he threatened to walk away, given what he saw as a lack of progress?
I'm not sure what the purpose is for the French foreign minister to say that, but most people in the world, they woke up to the Russian war in Ukraine after the full-scale invasion, but the war has been going on since 2014. And we have been in talks with them, and we have seen ploys like that many, many times. And I think the French, who had been involved in those negotiations prior to 2022, they have also learned the Russian tactics. So I'm absolutely sure that he's just calling a spade a spade.
Yulia, as well, I want to look ahead to this meeting taking place with Ukrainian officials, European officials, and we now know US officials as well. How pivotal is this meeting in potentially putting pressure on Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire deal if these conversations that he's talking about, bilateral conversations, can't take place?
It's important to keep talking, and it's important for the US to actually see what's happening and to see that it's Russia who's refusing to stop the war, and it's also important to actually agree on security guarantees for Ukraine. And that's something that, from what I understand, is happening in those conversations. And bilateral talks, they can take place, but we've already seen this before when President Putin was claiming in 2019 that he was open to talks with President Zelensky, and those talks never happened because he kept making conditions for direct talks. So it's noise. So they can take place, but again, it's Russia's decision.
Yulia, I want to end our discussion with the fact that Russia has admitted to civilian casualties on the Ukrainian side. Is this potentially a softening in stance? And do you think that this could be the door opening slightly for a real Russian intent and Putin's real intent to end this war as soon as possible, as Donald Trump has been saying and as President Putin has been saying himself?
Well, I think it's more of a ploy to keep President Trump in the talks and to stop him from taking a decisive action against Russia, because for as long as the talks are going, we've seen what the current administration does. They refuse to condemn the Russian aggression. They even vote in the UN along with Russia and all those countries that have been considered the axis of evil, right? Those who had been considered the U.S. enemies. And so, from what I understand, for as long as the talks are going, President Trump's administration is not taking any decisive action. So, feigning some sort of a concession or some sort of a softening is a way to keep the U.S. administration in the talks and to restrain them from taking a decisive action.
Yulia Kazdabina, thank you ever so much for joining us. Of course, as those talks take place with senior officials from Europe, the US and Ukraine, we will bring you all of those updates and ahead of any potential bilateral talks between Russia and Ukraine directly. We move on now, and Iran's Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas Araghchi is set